I will be speaking about the International Student Financial Aid application. So far we've spoken about the application process to the US, and we said that we need to use the College Board website to search for colleges, and then we also said that we must use the Common App website to apply to these colleges. So once you've started your application, you will need to fill in the financial aid application form. Okay, so as you can see, this form is outdated. That's what I'm using, but there's always a new one every year. So if you're applying this year, then you'll need to use a 2015 to 2016 application form. So you can get everything online in the College Board website. Okay, so there are two application forms that you need to fill out for the financial aid application. So some colleges require that you fill both of them. So the first one is this one. It's the International Student Financial Aid application. Remember, you cannot fill the FAFSA, which is the American Student Application form. You need to fill in the International Student Financial Aid application form. So in addition to this form, you will need to fill in the CSS profile. So my colleagues here, we will tell you about the CSS profile. I will tell you about this form. Okay, so let's begin. So this is the first page of the application. As you can see, everything is straightforward. You just need to put in your names, your address, your email address, just something about your email address. Remember that you cannot use your the email addresses that you use with your friends for this. No nicknames, no funny names. Just I would suggest that you use your first name and your last name at yahoo.com, at gmail.com. So I would suggest that you create a new one for this one. Okay. And then when it says expected visa type, just fill in F1. F1 is the student visa. Okay. And guys, just remember that you need to take note of what we'll be discussing today, because there might be some nuances that we'll talk about. Okay. So for question 10, list below the names of the colleges and universities to which you're applying. So if you're sending this document to 5 colleges, just fill it in. If you're sending it to 1, write the name of the college. Okay, let's move on to section B. Section B asks for your parents' information. You can just fill it in. It's very straightforward. Question 15, how many people, including yourself, depend on the income of your parents for daily living? So you might have some family members that your parents support. In that case, say for example, if your parents support your grandparents or some other family members, your sisters and your brothers, of course, you need to count that and you need to write the number here. So it might be 0, 4 if they support 4 people, or 3 or something. And then in question 16, you write down the name of these people. So their relation to you, for example, person X, the relation to you might be your brother, the name of the school they're going to, how much your parents pay for this person. So everything needs to be in dollars. And I know it's going to be difficult to convert everything to dollars, but you need to estimate. Okay. Question C is the financial information part. So here, question 17 asks you to send the documentation for further proof to verify income and assets information. So here, you need to send 3 documents. The first document is the bank statement. So your parents need to go to their respective banks and they need to get the bank statement, and then you need to send your parents' employer verification letter. So your parents need to get a letter from their employers documenting the amount that they receive on a monthly basis. It would be preferable if you have it in dollar terms. Okay. And then these documents will need to be faxed to the colleges, to every single college that you're sending this document to. And then question 18 asks for the present exchange rate. You can get that online or ask the banks. Okay. So does your government currently impose restrictions on the exchange and release of funds for study in the United States? Some banks do impose restrictions, but you need to inquire with your bank. This is something that your parents will need to go and ask for further information about. Okay, so how will you pay for your transportation to the US? This depends on the person. This is a very personal question, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a very personal question, but it depends from college to college, but usually universities want to see that you can cover your own expenses when it comes to like traveling, so it gives you a little bit of an advantage in that case.
Okay, yeah, and then for question 20, when it asks, do you have a source of emergency funds once you arrive in the United States? So if you have family members in the United States, perhaps you could say yes. But if not, then you can write no, because once you get there, you can open your own debit account. Okay. So question 22, and so question 22 asks for the household income. I know that in our culture, this is very personal information, but colleges will need to know how much your parents make, what your parents own in order to finance your education here. They need to know that that you're eligible for financial aid. Okay, so as discussed before, this is not a merit scholarship, it's a financial aid form application, so it's based on financial need, and that is why they ask so many of these questions. Yeah, so this depends from one person to another.
Yeah. Make sure all the numbers are out.
Yes, exactly. So just make sure that, so when it asks for your father's work here, I remember that in that document written by your father's employer, just make sure that it's exactly the same thing. Just make sure that everything adds up and everything aligns, because they will cross-check. Okay. So will there be a significant increase or decrease in your family's income next year? So this depends upon whether whether you've heard that your parents are getting a raise, or if they're changing their jobs, or no. So it's very personal information again. Okay. So yeah, so these again are very arbitrary. They depend from one person to another. Okay, so when we come here to section D and section F, these ask you to, D to F, these ask you to break down your spending, okay? So I know that, families don't document how much they spent on food, on clothing, on medical expenses the year before, but that's what it asks. So I suppose what you need to do is to estimate based on your parents' income. This is something that you need to sit down with your parents and work out. It might take a bit of time, but don't get bogged down on this section, because just make sure that things are very feasible and they're applicable, and just make sure that everything adds up. In the end of the day, that the amount that you spend, that your parents spend, and the amount that your parents save is what is actually documented in your parents' financial statements.
And especially when the bank account comes in.
Yes.
The bank information, that's very important.
Okay.
You don't want to, if there's like a huge gap between what your parents are saving yearly and like the amount of money they have in the bank account, then the college are going to be suspicious, and they're not going to give you any financial aid.
Yeah. Just make sure that every information is accurate, guys. Okay. And then here is a section that your parents can use to explain special circumstances. So yeah. So this is it for this form.